Robert Utley wrote 23 books that won awards, but he also took photographs and put them in 22 photograph albums with captions of date, people, and places. The following are a few from his collection, not masterpieces of art, but memories of a wonderful life. Robert Utley was born in a small town of Bauxite, Arkansas, on Halloween, 1929. He modestly observed that his birth probably set off the Great Depression. His father, Don Utley, spent his career as a chemist for Alcoa. His mother, Valeria, was a beautiful woman, but suffered from severe depression. Not relating well to his parents, he came to idolize his grandfather, Joseph Utley, who was the Arkansas Attorney General. Bob underachieved in school until his junior year, when he starred as Charlie's aunt in the school play to great acclaim.
Earl Flynn, in They Died with Their Boots On, made me a Custer addict, and there are lots of them throughout the country. I was only 12 years old then, but that was during World War II.
Now addicted to Custer at age 16, he visited Custer Battlefield, foisted himself on the superintendent, and begged for a job, despite the fact he was 4 years too young to qualify. Superintendent Edward Luce found a loophole that allowed him to hire Bob, earning his love, admiration, and respect. At last, Bob found a surrogate father. One instance, however, nearly got him fired. He tried on Custer's original uniform, forbidden by law. After graduating Purdue University in 1951 with high grades in history, he moved to Indiana University and finished his master's degree in 2 semesters, with a thesis later published as Custer and the Great Controversy. In 1952, the Army drafted Bob. On his entry photograph, he wrote, "The smile was not genuine." After making his way through officers' candidate school, he became a tactical officer, not his idea of being, quote, an officer and a gentleman, unquote. After 2 years, Bob's friends in the military used their influence to get Lieutenant Utley transferred to the Joint Chiefs of Staff Historical Section. His lieutenant colonel said, "I wish you good luck, Lieutenant, but tell me one thing, how the hell did you do it?" Joining a staff of superb historians, he learned to write, as they pounded clarity, focus, and structure into everything he wrote. By 1959, he was married and had 2 boys, Don and Phil. Moreover, he had left the Joint Chiefs of Staff for a permanent job with the National Park Service in Santa Fe, New Mexico. By 1970, Bob hoped his boys were old enough to travel because he wanted to visit Pancho Villa's widow in Chihuahua City, Mexico. Bob loved his job, especially when products propelled him back to General Custer, such as Custer's victory over the Cheyennes at the Washita. This time, Bob sought out Indians who eagerly told him their version of the battle. Then, December 31st, 1972, brought a shocking blow to Bob. His favorite director and hard-charging boss, George Hartzog, was fired by President Nixon. Hartzog's whole staff assembled for one last picture. Still, Bob's hard work and effective leadership won him many awards. He received the highest award of the Department of the Interior and 3 honorary doctorates. Then in 1976, he found himself once again at Custer Battlefield, giving the keynote address at the 100th anniversary of the Custer Battle. Meanwhile, Bob had matured and no longer worshipped Custer. He edited the papers of Custer's officer, Albert Barnitz, and his wife, who judged Custer disgusting and tyrannical. While Bob believed that Custer had positive aspects, he could show his sense of humor by sharing a photograph with anthropologist Jack Ewers and his wife, holding a T-shirt saying, "Custer had it coming." After 7 long years, Bob and Melody wanted to get married. Bob convinced his boss to abolish his high-ranking job so he could retire with a pension in 1980 in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Bob wasted no time. 2 days after getting married, they purchased their first car. Then 1 month later, they bought a new passive solar home. Although Melody still worked, she believed it was her civic duty to join the El Dorado Fire Department. Bob doubted that being a fire department was something he needed to do, but he wanted to share her world. Initially, they wore 1960s protective gear and drove a 1947 fire engine. Just 2 years later, the department owned a new fire engine, modern protective gear, and Melody became assistant chief and Bob a lieutenant. Retirement satisfied Bob. He had time to write books, enjoy life, and travel with Melody. 2 memorable events occurred in 1983. One was returning to Logan Canyon, where Bob and Melody first got together at a 1973 Writers' Conference. Then, at the Salt Lake City Western History Association meeting, several of Bob's younger friends gave him a surprise party. 70 people attended the dinner and gave him a standing ovation as he entered the room. He thought he was in the wrong room and tried to walk out. Throughout the 1980s, the El Dorado Fire Department became important to Bob and Melody. They seldom fought house fires. Instead, they usually wound up at the dump, with Bob holding the hose. Bob especially enjoyed reunions with his old friends. Once he and Melody went to Fort Benning for his 30th reunion of Officer Candidate School. Then in 1985, his oldest friend, Bill Brown, showed up to help celebrate Bob's 56th birthday. After Melody became superintendent of Lyndon B. Johnson National Historical Park, they bought a large house 20 miles from the park with a swimming pool, just right for parties. There were special occasions when the LBJ Library held black-tie dinners, such as the 25th anniversary of President Johnson's inauguration and Lady Bird's 80th birthday. Bob and Melody also arranged a big barbecue for attendees of the Western History Association on the banks of the Pedernales River at the LBJ Ranch. Once when Bob gave a lecture at Lincoln County Courthouse in New Mexico, he found himself arguing with another Billy the Kid author on how Billy escaped. Ironically, both authors died within a week of each other. In September 1992, Bob and Melody transferred to Grand Teton National Park and into a log house built by the Civilian Conservation Corps in 1933. It was called the Superintendent's Residence, even though Melody was only assistant superintendent. They made one last trip to LBJ to celebrate the massive conversion of an old hospital into a beautiful visitor center, largely done while Melody was superintendent. Congressman Jake Pickle also received a Ranger hat for funding the visitor center. In 1994, Bob had won 2 awards at the Conference of Western Writers of America. He received a Spur Award for The Lance and the Shield and a large bison sculpture for Lifetime Achievement. Also, during the 1990s, television documentaries on the West boomed. Bob found himself in great demand and appeared in nearly 80 various productions.
With a lifestyle that guaranteed independence and practically no authority and lots of excitement.
Often exhausted with the long days, he still reveled in the attention.
The Chiricahuas from that Apache Pass reservation were all uprooted and taken to San Carlos. That's when Geronimo decided he did not want to go there.
During the 1990s, Bob enjoyed riding in Don's personally rebuilt 1983 Austin Healey and sharing Thanksgiving dinner with Phil. Meanwhile, several guests came to the Tetons to visit. One was Dave Evans, who guided Melody down the Yukon River over a 3-month period in 1976, looking for historic sites. Another 2 were the owners of the oil painting done by Henry Ration that became the cover for The Lance and the Shield. More important for Bob was living in the superintendent's residence, listed on the National Register of Historic Places, that in 1966 he helped establish. As the years passed, Bob's mobility diminished and the number of trips decreased. In 2013 in Oklahoma City, Bob's book Geronimo won a Wrangler sculpture from the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum. This time, Bob's editor, Chris Rogers, was awarded a sculptor as well. Also in 2013, old friends from Australia came to tour Arizona. Fortunately, Bob held up well. On Bob's 90th birthday in 2019, he received a T-shirt that said, "It took me 90 years to look this good." 2 years later, Larry McGrath photographed Bob surrounded by his books, awards, and sculptors for the April 2021 cover of V magazine. Bob continued to be involved in the community and decorated his motor scooter for the Christmas parade, the only scooter. Bob's last photo from his 22 photo albums was his Christmas card for 2021, celebrating his last book award, a Spur Award for his final book, The Last Sovereigns, Sitting Bull and the Resistance of the Free Lakota.